Good day everyone, I am David Patawe from BSc 3-5. Today, I'm gonna discuss a challenging but crucial topic, understanding terrorism. By the end of our discussion, you'll be able to identify and understand what makes someone a terrorist. Number 2 is recognize the various types of terrorists based on motivations and actions. And number 3, analyze and identify examples of terrorism worldwide. So first, who is terrorist? A terrorist is defined of a group that is engaged in kidnapping or murdering one who engaged in act of terrorism. It is also defined as one who leads an armed group that kills civilians as means of political intimidation. And last is a terrorist is a person who uses violence, especially murder and bombing. So, a terrorist is defined as someone who uses violence, such as bombings or murders, para lang ma-achieve yung political goals of the terrorists. Unlike ordinary criminals, terrorists use violence as a tool to spread fear and to influence or challenge the actions of the governments or the societies. So let's look into five main types of terrorists. We have five main types of terrorists, and number one is state terrorists. So a state terrorist is defined typically refers to an individual or group of individuals acting on behalf of a government or state apparatus to carry out acts of terrorism. This can include a high-ranking government officials or military leaders, secret police, or paramilitary forces who orchestrate or direct acts of terror to achieve political control, suppress, dissent, or intimidate a population. So, uh, the state's terrorists, these are individuals or groups who act on the behalf of our government or the government to commit acts of terror. So basically, uh, they are politicians, and on behalf of the government, they commit to acts of terror. Their actions often aim to intimidate, control, or suppress dissent within their own population. So we have examples here of state terrorists. The number one is Hafez al-Assad. His regime used violence, including the infamous 1982 Hama massacre, to crush opposition, which is sometimes considered a form of state terrorism. So, Hafez al-Assad is responsible for the Hama massacre in the country of Syria in the year of 1982. The next example of state terrorist is Muammar Gaddafi. He is known for supporting international terrorism, such as the bombing of FAMAN Flight 103 and for violent repression within Libya. Yan. Muammar Gaddafi is linked to international terrorist acts and repression within the country of Libya. The next is Saddam Hussein. His government used chemical weapons and brutal tactics against Kurdish populations and other international dissenters. So, Saddam Hussein used brutal tactics against Kurdish populations in the country of Iraq. Yan. These three persons are the state-supported acts are often overlooked but have a significant history impacts on history. So, yeah, these are the three example of state terrorists throughout history. Our next example or kind of terrorist is dissident terrorists. A dissident terrorist refers to an individual or group that engage in acts of terrorism against a government or ruling authority, often as part of a resistance or opposition movement. These terrorists typically comes from within the state but oppose its policies, leaderships, or structures, and they resort to violent tactics to achieve their political or ideological goals. Dissident terrorists are usually motivated by a desire to overthrow the government, change the political system, or challenge what they see as unjust laws or oppressions. So basically, dissident terrorists oppose their government or ruling authority, often as part of a rebellion. Their goals are usually to overthrow a political system they see as oppressive. So we have example here of dissident terrorists. Ayan, the New People's Army or also known as NPA. So in the Philippines, the NPA is the armed wing of the Communist Party of the Philippines, also known as CPP. It has been classified as terrorist organization by the Philippine government and several other countries. The group used guerrilla warfare tactics to fight the government, aiming to establish a communist state. So, in the Philippines, the example of dissident terrorists is the NPA. NPA is oppose the Philippine government or our government with the aim of establishing a communist state. They want to build a communist state. They want to change our government or Philippine government with the aim of establishing a communist state. They use guerrilla warfare tactics and are classified as a terrorist organization by both local and international bodies. Um, this group, like NPA, can often lead to long-term conflicts within a country. Okay, next kind of terrorist is religious terrorist. A religious terrorist is an individual or group that uses violence or terror tactics in the name of advancing or defending a particular religious ideology, often targeting those who are seen as enemies of their faith. These terrorists believe their acts of violence are justified by their religious beliefs, and they seek to impose or defend their interpretation of religious principles through violent means. So, basically, religious terrorists justify their violent action by interpreting their faith in a way that promotes terror against those they see as opponents of their beliefs. We have example here of religious terrorists. Number one is Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is a militant Islamist group responsible for the September 11, 2001 attacks in the United States. That group The group aims to establish a global Islamic caliphate and justifies its action as part of the Holy War, jihad against non-believers and Western influence. We all know what happened in the 9/11 attacks, right? They aim to create a global Islamic state by waging a holy war or jihad. So Al-Qaeda is the one who is responsible for the September 11, 2001 9/11 attacks in the two buildings in the America. So the next example of religious terrorists is ISIS or Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. ISIS also an Islamic extremist group. It seeks to create an Islamic State government by strict Sharia law. They are notorious for their brutal tactics, including bombings, executions, and attacks on civilians. Um, ISIS seeks to establish a strict religious states under Sharia law. They are known for violent tactics against civilians. In the Philippines, we have ISIS. So they are using their faith just to create violence or just to uh, to justify their violent action by interpreting their faith. Okay. Religious terrorism is one of the most complex because it combines ideology with violence. Okay. Let's go to the next kind of terrorist. Criminal terrorist. A criminal terrorist is an individual or group that engage in acts of terrorism primarily for personal gain, such as financial profit, rather than for ideological, political, or religious reasons. While most terrorists are motivated by ideology or belief systems, criminal terrorists exploit terrorism to further criminal enterprises like drug trafficking, kidnapping for ransom, extortion, or smuggling. So, basically, criminal terrorists, unlike the other types of terrorists, criminal terrorists are motivated by financial profit rather than ideology. For example, in the Philippines, we have Abu Sayyaf. So originally, a jihadist group seeking to establish an Islamic State in the Philippines, Abu Sayyaf became more associated with criminal activities such as kidnapping for ransom, bombing, and extortions. Their actions shifted toward criminal terrorism as they engaged in profit-driven violence. So criminal terrorists show us how terrorism can sometimes intersect with organized crime. And let's go to the last kind of terrorists, international terrorists. An international terrorist is an individual or group that carries out acts of terrorism across national borders or targets multiple countries aiming to spread fear, violence, or chaos on a global scale. International terrorists often have broader goals beyond a single nation and seek to influence international policies, global governance, or cultural conflicts. They may target foreign nationals, government, or symbols of international institutions. So, international terrorists operate across borders, targeting multiple countries to spread fear globally. So, meaning international terrorists is not just staying in a one country. So, they are targeting multiple countries or the whole globe or the whole the whole globe. Their motives often include changing international policies or influencing global issues. So we have example of international terrorists here. The number one is Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is known for orchestrating the 9/11 attacks in the US. Just what I've said earlier, the Al-Qaeda. And number two is ISIS. While initially focused on the Middle East, ISIS expanded its attack globally. So meaning ISIS is not just here in the Philippines, right? So they also expanded its attacks globally. Uh, international terrorists, they show how terrorists can have global consequences affecting international security and policies. So that's it. That's the kind of terrorists. And again, the number one type of terrorist is state terrorists. And number two is dissident terrorists. And number three is religious terrorists. And number four is criminal terrorists. And lastly is international terrorists. So in conclusion, Uh, terrorism is use of violence, such as murder and bombings to achieve political, ideological, or financial goals. It comes in a different forms, each with its own reasons and methods. State terrorists work for governments to silence opposition, while dissident terrorists fight against those governments to challenge their power. Religious terrorists commit violence to promote or protect their beliefs. believing their actions are justified by their faith. Criminal terrorists use terror for personal gain, often involved in illegal activities. And lastly, international terrorists operate across borders aiming to create fear and influence global policies through their violent actions. Now, let's take some time for question. You can feel free to ask anything about the types of terrorism, example, or anything that needs further explanation. Just comment in the YouTube comment section below. And that's it for the types of terrorists. Again, I am David Marl Patawe, and I am from BSC 3-5. Thank you for listening, and see you for our next topic.